Ladies and gentlemen, make sure that you're comfortable, that you're ready for a deep shock, because I'm going to make the connection between Osama bin Laden and George Herbert Walker Bush and his son George W. Bush. So you might want to listen very, very carefully, and I guarantee you, you're going to be amazed. You're going to wake up, you're going to be shocked, you're going to be angry, and then some things are going to begin to make a whole lot of sense that never made any sense before. Ladies and gentlemen, shortly after or during Bush's tenure at Yale University, he was recruited into the Central Intelligence Agency. George Herbert Walker Bush, that's the father of the current president, who was our president at another point in our recent history, was deeply involved in the fiasco at the Bay of Pigs. Now, all of this stuff is on record. It's been published in many, many books and reports and articles, for years. So you're going to have to go and look that up. Some of it can be researched on our website. There are some stories at the end of the one that we have on our exclusives page entitled America's New War. If you click on every single one of those links at the end of that story and read all of the text within those stories in separate newspapers and news services and websites, you will begin to pick up the web, and you will be referred to other links and sources so that you can verify all of this material for yourself. We've given that to you. In my book, Behold a Pale Horse, you can see some of the history of President George Herbert Walker Bush in connection with the Central Intelligence Agency, the drugs in the Golden Triangle, the connection between the Iran-Contra affair, drugs, Oliver North, Admiral Poindexter, and a whole bunch of other things, and that tremendous financial conglomerate known as Bank of Credit and Commerce International, otherwise known to researchers as BCCI. The Central Intelligence Agency under George Herbert Walker Bush, and later under Vice President George Herbert Walker Bush, and even later under President George Herbert Walker Bush, assisted the Afghani freedom fighters in Afghanistan against the invasion and occupation of their country by the Soviet Union, in order to create the element that was needed to bind the various Islamic sects groups and different tribal affiliations under one concerted cause to fight the Soviet Union. The Central Intelligence Agency corrupted the religion of Islam and taught this corrupted version to special leaders that they recruited in order to teach it to others in cooperation with the Pakistani SIS, that's their secret intelligence service. A lot of these schools and a lot of this instruction was conducted within the borders of Pakistan and in Afghanistan by operatives of the Central Intelligence Agency from America's SEAL teams and Special Forces, sent to Afghanistan by the Special Operations Division of the Department of Defense, also known as the Special Operations Group, or SOG. All of this, too, is a matter of record. A friend and business partner of the Bush family for many years, the senior bin Laden, sent his son to help in this effort. The younger, Osama bin Laden, was recruited by the Central Intelligence Agency, trained by them as one of these special leaders to teach the corrupted version of Islam, the corrupted version that convinced all of these young, hot-blooded Muslims that they should participate in a specific jihad or holy war against the Soviet Union. Arms were furnished by the Central Intelligence Agency, and there were advisors from the United States of America with these people as they fought the war against the Soviets for all of those years. Now, for that as a background, and most of it already published and in the public domain in many different books, in many different papers, many different reports, has come out in Senate and House investigating committees during their questioning. A lot of it came out during the so-called Iran-Contra affair and in a whole lot of other investigations in and out of government. Most of you already know these things. Those of you who don't, you're going to have to spend some time reading, researching, and catching up. Tonight, I'm going to give you some information that I have independently confirmed through my own research, and others have also independently confirmed in their own research, and you will find in various reports and documents and books, much of which can be found on the internet. Tonight, I'm going to quote to you from a book entitled Fortunate Son, written by J.H. Hatfield. J.H. Hatfield. When this book was first published, ladies and gentlemen, the copies extant are already out to the public sector, were rounded up somewhat mysteriously. The publisher withdrew their support of the book. The plates used for printing the book were smashed, and the book was, the way they say it in the publishing business, put up on the shelf. I'm going to begin quoting from a chapter entitled Ties That Bind, beginning on page 54, second to the last paragraph. George W.'s early days, or early years, in Midland, Texas, coincided with heady days for West Texas, touched off by the 1973 Arab oil embargo, as the price of crude eventually soared to more than $30 a barrel, and economists predicted it would go even higher. The junior Bush desperately wanted a bigger piece of the action, to strike it rich like his father did years earlier, but without using any of his own money. In June 1977, he formed his own drilling company, Arbusto Energy. Arbusto in Spanish means bush. Like his father, who made his fortune in the oil business with the money of others, George W. founded Arbusto with the financial backing of investors including James R. Bath, B-A-T-H, a Houston businessman whom Bush apparently first met when they were in the same Texas Air National Guard unit. Tax documents and personal financial records in the public sector show that Bath, an aircraft broker with business ties to Saudi Arabia sheiks, had invested $50,000 in Arbusto, granting him a 5% interest in 2 limited partnerships which were controlled by Bush. In one of the most bizarre footnotes to history, Time magazine described Bath in 1991 as a deal broker whose alleged associations run from the Central Intelligence Agency to a major shareholder and director of the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, also known as BCCI, as it was more commonly known. It was closed down in July 1991 amid charges of multi-billion-dollar fraud and worldwide news reports that the institution had been involved in covert intelligence work, drug money laundering, arms brokering, bribery of government officials, and aid to terrorists. And I can tell you that's all true. An accounting commissioned by the Bank of England finally exposed the extent of BCCI's deficits and criminal offenses, forcing the bank's eventual collapse. Bath was never directly implicated in the BCCI scandal. But according to the Outlaw Bank, an award-winning 1993 book by Time correspondents Jonathan Beatty and S.C. Gwynn, Baath originally made his fortune by investing money for Sheikh Khalid bin. That's Sheikh Khalid bin Mahfouz and another BCCI-connected Saudi, Sheikh bin Laden. Allegedly, and he absolutely is, it's not allegedly at all, the father of none other than Osama bin Laden, the man accused by the U.S. government of masterminding the August 1998 terrorist bombings of the American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, which killed more than 250 people, and now the mastermind of the attacks upon the Pentagon and the North and South Towers of the World Trade Center buildings in New York City. According to news reports, in a 1976 trust agreement drawn shortly after Bush's father was appointed director of the Central Intelligence Agency, now listen closely, Saudi Sheikh Salam bin Laden appointed Baath as his business representative in Texas. Bin Laden, along with his brothers, owned Bin Laden Brothers Construction, one of the largest construction companies in the Middle East. In a 1991 deposition, Baath testified he was the sole director of Skyway Aircraft Leasing Limited, a Houston company owned by Khaled bin Mahfouz. Bin Mahfouz had been a major shareholder in the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, which had been accused of using Mideast oil money to seek ties to political leaders in other countries throughout the 1970s and the 1980s. According to court documents that are on public record, Baath also swore that in 1977 he represented 4 prominent and wealthy Saudi Arabians as a trustee and used his name on their investments in the United States. In return, he received a 5% interest in their deals. Federal authorities, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and the FBI later investigated Baath after allegations. Once again, folks, listen carefully. Federal authorities, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and the FBI later investigated Baath after allegations were made by one of his American business partners that the Saudis were using Baath and their enormous financial sources to influence United States policy. Time reporters Beatty and Gwynn suggest in their book that the $50,000 Baath invested in George W.'s Arbusto Energy Drilling Company may have belonged to Baath's Saudi clients, since the Houston businessman had no money of his own at the time. The truth is, the only source of his investment money was from the Saudi investors whose names I have already quoted to you. Ironically, the money used to underwrite the first business venture of a possible future president of the United States may have been derived, at least in part, from the family fortune of Saudi terrorist Osama bin Laden. In 1990, in an attempt to distance himself and his presidential father from the growing BCCI scandal, George W. Bush stated in an interview that neither he nor the elder Bush had ever conducted business with James Baath. It was a bold-faced lie. Junior went on record at the time as saying that he met the Houston businessman in 1970 when both were fighter pilots at the Air National Guard base at Ellington Air Force Base. President Bush, quote, knows Baath the way he knows thousands of people, end quote, his son told the press. And the two men could not be considered good friends. Another bold-faced lie. Quote, I've never done business with him, and I know the president hasn't either, end quote. Another bold-faced lie. Because, ladies and gentlemen, a few months later, the release of tax documents and personal financial records into the public sector forced George W. Bush to admit that Baath had indeed been one of Arbusto Energy's original investors. Bush said that to his knowledge, Baath's investment was from personal funds, and no available evidence existed to determine that the money came from Saudi interests, except for the fact that no person